Hello, my dear students. Welcome you all to Sri Jain Rank Zone classes. I am your mentor and your friend for the subject biology, and I will be taking the zoology part, that is animal science. My dear students, in the last lecture, we studied about the anatomy of heart, the structure of heart. We discussed about different valves. We discussed about systemic heart, pulmonary heart, walls of heart, epicardium, myocardium, endocardium, their origin. So I will just give a glimpse again so that you can remember that the walls of heart, they are basically of three types, three major types: epicardium, myocardium, and endocardium. Epicardium is the outermost, then comes the myocardium, which is the middle layer, and then comes the endocardium. So please remember that epicardium, myocardium, and endocardium. Epicardium is the outermost layer made up of simple squamous epithelium. Myocardium is the middle layer. It is the thickest layer and made up of cardiac muscles which are striated but involuntary. Cardiac muscles, thickest layer. Endocardium is the innermost layer made up of simple squamous epithelium. Epithelium, right? Now, there are many questions in the past previous question papers, and they directly hit upon the valves and certain facts, like you have to remember Thebasian valve, which guards coronary sinus, eustachian valve, which guards inferior vena cava. During embryological life, the human embryonic heart consists of six valves. Consists of six valves: tricuspid, bicuspid, pulmonary, yeah. So we were talking about that in human embryonic heart there are presence of six valves, and these six valves are tricuspid, bicuspid, pulmonary, semilunar, semilunar, aortic semilunar. One is pulmonary semilunar, other one is aortic semilunar, then Thebasian and Eustachian. Okay, Thebasian valve and Eustachian valve. So one, two, three, four, five, and six. Six valves. Thebasian and Eustachian valves merge into the musculature of their respective veins after birth. Thebasian and Eustachian valve get merged in the musculature of their respective veins. Their respective veins. right? In embryogenic heart, small opening foramen ovale is present at interatrial septum, which after birth is modified to fossa ovalis. So in embryonic heart, foramen ovale is present, which is close to form fossa ovalis. In embryonic heart, a small ductus arteriosus is present which connect pulmonary artery and aorta, which after birth is modified to ligamentum arteriosum. So in embryogenic heart, ductus arteriosus is present which connects pulmonary artery to aorta. Okay, which is modified to ligamentum arteriosum. Now, conduction of heartbeat. The conduction system of heart, especially when we talk about humans. So in humans, the heart is myogenic. Okay, myogenic heart. Myogenic heart, the impulse of the heartbeat develops within the heart. The impulse of heartbeat develops within the heart. Okay. The impulse is generated by a spatial muscular tissue, and it is generated by spatial muscular tissue. Okay. Examples of myogenic heart is molluscans, and vertebrates. The other heart is neurogenic heart, in which the impulse of heartbeat comes from outside the heart. Okay, it is generated by nervous system. Example: orthopods and annealids. So, the human heart, the automatic rhythmicity of the heart is its ability to contract spontaneously at a regular rate. So, human heart is autorhythmic heart, which is able to contract spontaneously at a regular rate. Okay. In practice, this represents apex or ventricular beat with an advantage of 72 beats per minute in adult human. It is high in infants and low in aged persons. So the heartbeat is basically it is or it can be it can be easily evaluated, diagnosed. Okay, at the apex or the ventricular beat with an advantage of 72 beats per minute in adult human, and it is high in infants and low in aged persons. Similarly, heartbeat is fast in small animals, 200 beats per minute in rabbit and 500 beats per minute in sparrow. Okay, and low in large animals like 25 beats per minute in elephant, as well as cold-blooded animals, 64 beats per minute in frog. Okay, the heartbeat is fast in small animals, 200 beats per minute in rabbit, 500 beats per minute in sparrow, and low in large animals, 25 beats per minute in elephant, as well as cold-blooded animals, 64 beats per minute. Okay. The heartbeat is of two types, neurogenic and myogenic. Neurogenic heartbeat is initiated by a nerve impulse coming from the nerve by a nerve impulse coming from a nerve ganglion. Nerve ganglion is a mass of nerve collection of nerve cells situated near the heart. It is present in the heart of some annelids and most of the orthopods. Myogenic heartbeat is initiated by the path of modified heart muscles, the myocardial muscles itself. It is found in heart of molluscans and vertebrates. Heart of molluscans and vertebrates. Okay. So this is about the myogenic heart, neurogenic heart. Okay. In the myogenic heartbeat, the contraction is initiated. So the conducting system of the myogenic heart is basically, as we know, myogenic heart is made up of myocardium. So is made of myocardium. That is specialized for the initiation and conduction of cardiac impulses. Its fibers are finer than other myocardial fibers. These are completely cross-striated and possesses special nerve-like properties, self-excitatory neuromuscular pathway. It is having self-excitatory neuromuscular pathway. Okay. In the myogenic heart, contraction is initiated by a specialized path of modified heart muscles, the sinoatrial node. The sinoatrial node, SA node, which is situated in the wall of right auricle near the opening of superior vena cava. So in myogenic heartbeat, contraction is initiated by a specialized path of modified heart muscles known as uh, the SA node or sinoatrial node, which is situated in the wall of right auricle near the opening of superior vena cava. SA node act as a pacemaker. SA node act as a pacemaker of the heart because it is capable of initiating impulses, which then can stimulate the heart muscles to contract. Okay, it thus establishes the basic rhythm. Okay, at which the heart beats. It basically initiates the basic rhythm at which the heart beats. Sinoatrial node. Okay, so it is also known as the pacemaker. It is the initiator to ignite the impulse of or the rhythm of contraction. The impulse of contraction emitted by SA node spreads as a wave of contraction over the right and left atrial wall. It spreads in the left and right atrial wall, pushing the blood through the atrioventricular walls. Because of this, the blood gets pushed in the atrioventricular valves, because of the contraction of atria and and the diastole of ventricles through the atrioventricular valves into the ventricles. Okay, so as the impulse moves from as a node to both the atrial walls, the blood also pushed down from atrium to the through the atrioventricular valve into the ventricles. So the SA node is the pacemaker. It initiates the impulse. Then the impulse goes to internodal pathway. It goes to the internodal pathway, which is present at the junction of the walls between right and left atrium. Okay, the internodal pathway. So from SA node, it moves to internodal pathway. From internodal pathway, it moves to AV node. Okay, from AV node, it moves to bundle of His, and from bundle of His, it moves to right and left Purkinje fibers. Right and left Purkinje fibers. This wave of contraction next reaches the atrioventricular AV node or the pace settler, which is stimulated to emit an impulse of contraction spreading to the ventricular muscles in the atrioventricular bundle or Purkinje fibers. Atrioventricular bundle or Purkinje fibers. So the impulse basically moves from SA node to internodal pathway, then it moves to AV node, then it moves to bundle of His, okay, and from bundle of it, it moves to Purkinje fibers. So, SA node is also known as pacemaker of the heart. It is present in the right upper corner of the right atrium. It generates impulses at a rate of about 72 beats per minute and, and initiates the heartbeat. So, it basically generates the impulse at 72 beats per minute. Okay. Internodal pathway that connects the SA node to the AV node. Internodal pathway, it basically connects SA node to AV node. Connects SA node to AV node. Okay. Then comes the atrioventricular node, which is known as the pace settler, which is stimulated to emit an impulse of contraction spreading to the ventricular muscle in the atrioventricular bundle or Purkinje fibers. It is situated in the lower left corner of the right atrium. Situated lower left corner of right atrium. Close to the atrioventricular septum, it is capable of generating impulse at a rate of 40 beats per minute. So atrioventricular node can generate the impulse 40 beats per minute. Okay. Now, the atrial muscle fibers are separated from those of the ventricles by fibrous tissue ring. There is no functional continuity between the atria and ventricles. The atrial muscle fibers are separated from those of ventricles by fibrous tissue rings. There is no functional continuity between atria and ventricles. The only conducting tissue between atria and ventricles is the atrioventricular bundle or bundle of His. So bundle of His basically connects the atria to the ventricles. Okay, there is no functional connectivity between atria and ventricles. A bundle of His or atrioventricular bundle helps to connect between atria and uh, ventricles. Bundle of is also known as AV bundle or atrioventricular bundle. It is the connection between the atria and the ventricular musculature. It begins at the AV node and then divides into left and right branches and it descends down towards ventricles. Branches of the AV bundle descends on the interventricular septum and is distributed to the ventricle after dividing into Purkinje fibers. So these bundle of his basically divides into Purkinje fibers. AV bundle or atrioventricular bundle was discovered by His in 1983 and consists of set of specialized muscle strands originating from AV node and passed downwards to interventricular septum. This bundle then divided into right and left bundle branches, one going to each ventricle. With the myocardium of the ventricles, the branches break into a network of fine branching, and anastomosing filaments of fibers known as Purkinje fibers. Purkinje fibers. Okay. So Purkinje fibers, they are basically the fine filamentous, branchings of bundle of His or AV bundle. Okay. Now, bundle of His and Purkinje fibers convey the impulse of conduction from the AV node to the myocardium of ventricles. So the myocardial wall of ventricles, they basically receive the impulse of contraction, relaxation, a wave of rhythm. They receive because of this bundle of His and Purkinje fibers. Okay, is that clear? So Purkinje fibers, when we talk about the Purkinje fibers, this is the conduction pathway which is given. Okay, one thing I should tell you, the Purkinje fibers, they are distributed through the endocardium of the ventricles, distributed through the endocardium of ventricles and propagate the impulse in the entire ventricular musculature 18 to 25 beats per minute. Purkinje fibers. Okay. The SA node can generate the maximum number of action potentials, that is 70 to 75 beats per minute, and is responsible for initiating and maintaining the rhythmic contractibility of heart. Therefore, it is known as what? Pacemaker. Our heart normally beats 70 to 75 times in a minute, average is 72 beats per minute. Rhythmic contraction and relaxation of heart is called heartbeat. Actually, contraction and relaxation occurs separately in atria and ventricles. However, ventricles movements are quite prominent and forceful. Very important. This is the cardiac conduction system, SA node, 72 beats per minute at average. Okay, this is the left bundle branch, right bundle branch, Purkinje fibers, 18 to 25 beats per minute. AV node, 40 beats per minute. Okay, the sinoatrial node pacemaker generate impulses, internodal pathway. These are the internodal pathway. This is the, you can see, SA node, internodal pathway. The impulse 0.1 second at the AV node. The impulse get paused for 0.1 second at the AV node. The AV node bundle, the bundle of his connects the atria to the ventricles. The bundle branches conduct the impulses through the interventricular septum. Purkinje fibers depolarize the contractile cells of the both ventricles. Okay. Now, blue whale, Melanoptera musculus is having the largest heart. Blue whale. Okay. Heart rate is higher in women, children, and infants, and lower in aged persons. Okay. Now, SA node is called natural pacemaker of the heart, as impulse generated by it spreads through both the atria and through the AV node to ventricles for their rhythmic contraction. Okay. Disruption or insufficiency of any component of this impulse conductance system results in slowing down or irregularity of heart rhythm or independent contraction of atria and ventricles. It is known as what? Arrhythmic or arrhythmias, cardiac arrhythmias. So SA node is the natural pacemaker of the heart as impulse generated by it spreads through both the atria and through AV node to ventricles for their rhythmic contraction. Disruption or insufficiency of any component of this impulse conducting system results in slowing down or irregularity of heart rhythm or independent contraction of atria and ventricles. Failure of atrial impulse to pass into ventricles for a few seconds to few hours is called ventricular escape or Stokes-Adams syndrome. Stokes-Adams syndrome, very important. Stokes-Adams syndrome or ventricular escape. If the impulse is basically not transferred to ventricles, it is collecting at the atria, but it is not passing to the ventricles for few seconds or few hours. It is called ventricular escape or Stokes-Adams syndrome. In all such cases, an artificial pacemaker is implanted. Artificial pacemaker is implanted. In an electric device, first artificial pacemaker is the electric device first developed by Gripback and Chardek in 1960, which is connected to the heart for the covering for recovering up any deficiency of myogenic functioning so as to make it beat normally 70 to 80 beats per minute. A pacemaker has a pulse generator having long-lasting lithium-ion halide cells with over 10 years of life and a biocompatible plastic covered with fine metallic string for functioning as muscles stimulating electrode. There are various types of pacemaker. The pacemaker is an electric device first developed by Gripback and Chardek in 1960, which is connected to the heart for covering up any deficiency of myogenic functioning so as to make it beat normally 70 to 80 beats per minute. A pacemaker has a pulse generator having long-lasting lithium halide cells with over 10 years of life and a biocompatible plastic covered by metallic strings which functions as a muscle fibers for the proper conduction of impulse. Okay. Are various types of pacemaker. First is external pacemaker, epicardial pacemaker, endocardial pacemaker, demand pacemaker, atrial synchronized pacemaker, temporary pacemaker, and permanent pacemaker. These all are different types of pacemakers: external pacemaker, epicardial pacemaker, endocardial pacemaker, atrial synchronized pacemaker, demand pacemaker, temporary pacemaker, permanent pacemaker. All these are different types of pacemakers. Okay, I hope the things are clear to all. Okay, now coming to next, we will be talking about the cardiac cycle or the conduction of heartbeat. We have already discussed. In common type, the pulse generator is placed below the skin under right clavicle. In the common type of pacemaker, the pulse generator is placed below skin under right clavicle, while the string cable is passed via superior vena cava, right atrium, and allowed to rest against the tip of right ventricle. The pacemaker are liable to be influenced by microwave ovens, metal detectors, electric shavers, and cellophane. The pacemaker are liable to be influenced by microwave ovens, metal detectors, electric shavers, and cellophones. Cardiac cycle. Cardiac cycle basically, these are the events that occur from the beginning of one heartbeat to the beginning of the next are called cardiac cycle. The cardiac cycle consists of one heart or one cycle of contraction and relaxation of cardiac muscles. Okay, cardiac muscles. The contraction phase is called systole and the relaxation phase is called diastole. Contraction phase is known as what systole and the relaxation phase is known as what diastole. When both the atria and the ventricles are in diastole or in relaxed phase, this is referred to as joint diastole. During this phase, the blood flows from superior vena cava and inferior vena cava into the atria and from atria to the respective ventricles through atrioventricular valves. But there is no flow of blood from ventricles to the aorta and pulmonary trunk as semilunar valves remain closed. So one of the phases is joint diastole or the relaxed phase of for both atria and ventricles in which the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava they push all the blood into atria and atria then pushes blood to ventricles. Okay, then there is no flow of blood from ventricles to aorta or pulmonary trunk as the semilunar valves remain closed this time. So at the time of joint diastole, semilunar valves remain closed. The successive stages of cardiac cycle are briefly described by below atrial systole. Atria contract due to the wave of contraction stimulated by SA node. The first is the atrial systole. Okay, the cycle basically starts from joint diastole only and ends up in joint diastole only. Okay, the successive stages of cardiac cycle are first described as atrial systole. The atria contract due to the wave of contraction is stimulated by SA node. The blood is forced into the ventricles as the bicuspid and tricuspid valves are open. So the successive stages of the cardiac cycle are briefly described below. The atria contract due to the wave of contraction stimulated by SA node, sinoatrial node. The blood is forced into the ventricles as the bicuspid and tricuspid valves are open. So bicuspid and tricuspid valves are open at the time of atrial systole. Okay, atrial systole. Beginning of ventricular systole. The ventricles begin to contract, stimulated by AV node. The bicuspid and tricuspid valve close immediately, producing part of the first heart sound, that is love. Complete ventricular systole. When the ventricles complete their contraction, the blood flows into the pulmonary trunk and aorta respectively as the semilunar valves get open. Beginning of ventricular diastole, the early stage of ventricular diastole, the ventricles are relaxed and semilunar valves are closed. This causes second heart sound or dub. Complete ventricular diastole, the tricuspid and bicuspid valves are open when the pressure in the ventricle falls and blood flows from the atria into ventricles. The contraction of the heart does not cause the blood flow. This is due to the fact that the blood flow, due to the pressure difference, it is due to the fact that the pressure within the relaxed ventricles is less than that of the atria and veins. So all these phases are there, like atrial, the cycle starts from joint diastole, then atrial systole, then atrial diastole, okay, then ventricular systole, then ventricular diastole. Okay, now, yeah, the complete cardiac cycle is of zero point 0.8 second. Joint diastole is of zero point 0.4 second. Period during which entire heart is in diastole. It is a single cardiac cycle of in a single cardiac cycle of men, the atrial systole, zero point 0.1 second, atrial diastole, 0.7 second, ventricular systole, 0.3 second, ventricular diastole, 0.8 second here, 0.8 second here. Okay, 0.5 second. Okay, yeah. So this is about the systole and diastolic conditions of cardiac cycle: ventricular systole, ventricular diastole, atrial systole, and atrial diastole. Now, during ventricular systole, it is an important process because during it the blood is pumped out of the heart into the arteries. It has main parts. Okay, ventricular systole. So the parts of the ventricular systoles are isometric contraction. Walls of the ventricles start contracting, due to which pressure is more in the ventricles. Due to the increase of this pressure, the cuspid valves close, producing lub sound. Walls of the ventricles start contracting, due to which pressure is more in the ventricles. Due to the increase of this pressure, the cuspid valves, bicuspid and tricuspid, close. The AV valves close, producing love sound. Okay. After this isometric contraction in ventricular systole, it is followed by period of ejection. So here is a picture. You can see the ventricular systole. This is the early ventricular systole, the second one. And the third one is late ventricular systole. Okay. This is the early ventricular systole. This is the late ventricular systole. In the early ventricular systole, it shows the isometric contraction. Okay, it is already given ventricles contract. And during the late ventricular systole, it shows period of ejection. Period of ejection. Okay. Late shows period of ejection. I'll add one slide over here. Now, now please see to it. During this cycle, when pressure increases in the ventricles, this cycle, when pressure increases in the ventricles, okay, then followed by isometric contraction, when the pressure increases in the ventricles, the semilunar valves of the arches, mean the aortic arch and the pulmonary artery, open. Valves open. Okay. Because of opening of semilunar valves, blood rapidly enters into the arches, pushing the valves on one side. Valves are pushed on one side and blood rapidly moves in the arches. Okay, this is the period of ejection. The oxygenated blood from the left ventricle enters the carotid-systemic arch or aorta, and deoxygenated blood from the right ventricle enter into the pulmonary arch. As you know, during ventricular systole, the auricles receives blood from the veins. So during ventricular systole, the blood pushes the semilunar valves and goes into the aortic arches, uh, uh, the main aortic vessel, the aortic you know arch, and the second is the entrance of it, the deoxygenated blood into the pulmonary artery. So this is the period of ejection, which is followed by isometric contraction. Okay, isometric contraction. During ventricular systole, the auricles receive blood from the veins. Auricles receive blood from large veins. Okay. Then comes the ventricular diastole. Ventricular diastole is zero point 0.5 second. Ventricular systole is 0.3 second. Okay. Ventricular diastole. Ventricular diastole. 0.5 second. Okay. 0.3 second. Ventricles start relaxing now due to the pressure inside them falls further as a result of this closure of semilunar valves. Now, closure of semilunar valve produces the second heart sound. Produces dub sound. Second heart sound. Okay, this dub or DUP, dub heart sound. Okay, is basically it tells us about the onset of ventricular diastole. Ventricular diastole has following substages. One is the isometric relaxation. Because of the ejection of blood, the pressure inside the ventricles decrease as compared to the pressure inside the arches. The blood stops moving out and the ventricles prepare for relaxation. I repeat, when due to the ejection of blood, the blood gets ejected into the arches, the pressure inside the ventricles decreases as compared to the pressure inside the arches. Pressure inside the ventricles decreases as compared to arches. Okay, the blood stops moving out and the ventricles prepare for relaxation. The blood stops moving out, and the ventricles prepare for relaxation. And the ventricles prepare for relaxation. This is the isometric relaxation. Then rapid inflow. In ventricular systole, it was period of ejection. This is rapid inflow. Second is rapid inflow. In rapid inflow, after the systole in the ventricles, the systolic pressure reduces very much. This pressure becomes very less than the atrial pressure. Moreover, due to the relaxation in ventricles, the pressure inside them falls further. Now the cuspid valves open up and the blood flows rapidly from the atria to the ventricles. S3 heart sound is produced because of low pressure in ventricles, then atria. Rapid filling of the first filling of ventricles was slow. This is rapid filling. Rapid filling of ventricles produces S3 heart sound. And then comes diastasis. Diastasis. Okay. After the rapid inflow, the atria transfer the blood to the ventricles at the same rate at which they receive blood from the veins. So the inflow of blood reduces considerably. At this moment, pressure inside all the four chambers is equal, and the entire heart is in diastole, diastasis. Okay, entire heart is in diastole. Also, at this moment of this time, the AV valves are open, but semilunar valves are closed. AV valves are open, but semilunar are closed. Are closed. So diastasis means the initially rapid inflow was there in the rapid inflow of ventricles. Because of this, the pressure of the atria it decreases. Now the atria will transfer only that much amount of blood which the atria is receiving from the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. Okay, so the pressure is decreases as the movement pressure decreases. The the whole heart, all the chambers they are having same pressure. Okay, so isotonic. They have same pressure because of which it is known as what diastasis. All are in diastole, diastasis. Okay, the complete heart is in diastasis, which is followed by atrial systole, which is already explained. Atrial systole produces S4 heart sound. Okay, and then atrial diastole. Okay, atrial systole, due to the contraction of atria, the remaining blood comes into the ventricles, so the atrial pressure now becomes zero. So because of atrial systole, due to the contraction in the atria, the remaining blood, जो बचा हुआ blood है, that comes to the ventricles. Okay, so then atria pressure now becomes zero. S4 heart sound is produced. Atrial diastole, atria start relaxing now due to the presence of almost zero pressure in the atria. During diastole, the auricles start receiving further blood from the veins. So this is the atrial systole. Okay, related to S4 heart sound. S4 heart sound. Okay, and the atrial diastole, early ventricular systole, late ventricular systole. Yeah, everything is already explained. Okay, so please see this picture. So, my dear students, this is all about the the conduction system of the heart and the cardiac cycle. Okay, the heart sounds. There are sounds produced during the heartbeat due to the closure of valves. Love is the S1 first sound, systolic sound. In this first heart sound, which is dull, it is dull, loud, or low pitched. Okay, it is dull, loud, or low pitched of long duration, zero point 0.6 to 0.19 seconds, and is produced due to the closure of atrioventricular valves. Due to the closure of atrioventricular valves, tricuspid and bicuspid valves. This happens because of the ventricular systole. Okay, dub sound, S2 heart sound it is a diastolic sound. Okay, it is the second heart sound, which is the sharp, high-pitched of shorted duration, 0.1 second, and is produced due to the closure of semilunar valves at the base of greater arteries. A pause or gap occurs between the second heart sound and the first heart sound in the of the next cycle. It coincides with ventricular diastole. So it is the heart sound of ventricular diastole. This one. Okay. Incomplete closure of valves due to the disease or other defect produces abnormal heart sounds or cardiac murmurs. Heart sounds are listened by means of instrument called stethoscope. Okay, so cardiac murmurs is not a physiologic sound. They are the abnormal sounds. Okay, or abnormal heart murmurs. Phases of cardiac cycle already explained. Now I will be dealing with the regulation of heartbeat in the next lecture. Okay, and the ECG. That's why I'm not, making you understand this phase of the cardiac cycle, P, Q, everything I will be explaining in the coming videos. Till then, please take care. And one thing more, please stay connected by watching the previous videos of this chapter. Okay, bye bye. Take care, everyone. Stay safe. Stay healthy.